Hey everybody, we're gonna need two blocks for this downward facing dog tutorial. And so a very big part of the downward dog are the shoulders. And sometimes because our shoulders are tight or they're very much mobile, it's very difficult to find space, but also stability. So very often we would be just collapsing into the shoulders because there's not enough strength or even awareness to create that strength. Or maybe the shoulders are just so tight that we try to move beyond the range that the arm bone can move. Yeah. And so we're going to start by warming our shoulder blades and our shoulders up. We're going to also warm up a little bit the neck, the spine as well, and the pelvis with some cat-cows. But first, I just wanted to clarify a little bit because there seems to be a little bit of confusion biomechanically what happens when you raise arms overhead. So many teachers would emphasize on the protraction of the shoulder blades, which is a part of it. But the most part is that the shoulder blades, imagine them as wings sitting on your back, they upward rotate. And as they upwardly rotate, the shoulders are also going to lift, yeah? It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to move your shoulders down, but if there's already something going on in your shoulders or if they're tight, that might not be the first place where you start to do elevation, depression of your shoulder blades because you're in a loaded position. Your hands are on the floor and you have the body weight and you're also in a closed chain. So it's not a bad thing to move the shoulder blades up and down. Yeah, you do that if you're hanging from a bar, or you need to do it when you do different things. But it might not be the first thing you do. If you have zero awareness in controlling your shoulders, you're not really strong enough. And very often what I see, there's a little bit of a illiteracy or dyslexia in the movement of the shoulder blades, and they move all over the place and there's zero control. I see that in planks all the time in chaturangas, but we're talking about downward dog today. So let's start by warming up our shoulder blades. And I want you to try and feel and distinguish the four planes that the scapula are moving. So the upper arm is squeezing to the side of the body. Feel your rib cage and try to keep your arms there. Now, if sitting on your heels is not an option, you can always sit on a block or two, or you can even come into a higher kneeling position. And so the shoulders go up to the ears, and that is elevation. Then you squeeze your shoulder blades together, and that is retraction. And as you retract, as you squeeze them together, you push them down at the same time. And then you open the shoulder blades away from each other. You go to elevation, you go to retraction, you continue retracting as you depress down, then you protract again. And whilst you're doing all of that, nothing else is moving. Your arms are not moving forward or back, your elbows are not bending. Now let's reverse. You squeeze back, you lift, and also your head, neck, your spine, your pelvis are not moving either. We all very often have the tendency, or we have the tendency in our effort to retract the shoulder blades, to squeeze them if we cannot really control that movement. And for some people, it's very, very difficult. Then we borrow from the spine and the rib cage, which is not what we want to do. Yeah, so you squeeze back, you elevate, you protract, and you depress. And you repeat, squeeze back, lift, open the shoulder blades away from each other and down, and at the same time your upper arms are still squeezing to the side of the body, and then you finish your circle. Now from here we're going to go to the arm in the shoulder, and so we want to isolate the movement of the arm into the shoulder. So bending through our hips, bringing hands onto the floor, you externally rotate your left arm. And here, when we're going to take the arm across, I want you to pay attention not to collapse into the shoulder and not to pull your body to the side to rotate. So as if you're in a mold, in a cast, and your entire upper body is not moving. The only mobile part is the humerus bone in the shoulder, the arm into the shoulder. The other hand is firmly pushing down to give you support. Your core is engaging with your spine nice and tall. So coming into the adduction, and then you flex into the shoulder, you lift the arm up, and you bring it in its axial flexion, which is in line with the shoulder. Then you rotate in. You continue the rotation of the arm, and then you bring it beside you. Now the palm here is facing away because the arm is in a complete internal rotation. Then you lift it behind you in its axial extension. You find the edge, you push a little more, you again without turning, without bending, without shifting to the side, and you start to roll the arm out. Now let's try and move slowly. Imagine you're moving your arm into thick, dense water, as if you're having a paddle on your hand. Let's start again. And you're pushing it through water. And the water can even have a bigger density, like it's gel. Rotating the arm inwardly, continue to rotate until there's no more rotation, but keep the action of internal rotation. Maintain internal rotation until you reach your maximum extension. Find the edge, push a little more, and then rotate out. And lift it up. Bring it diagonally in front of you. Let's do one more. Diagonal. Up to the side of the ear. The other hand is firmly pressing. Rotating the arm. Rotate, 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 rotate. And now with this exercise, which is a warm-up, it could also be a strengthening exercise. We're making much more space into the shoulder joint. And as cartilage doesn't have any circulation really, with this rotational movement, we help to bring more nutrients and more hydration into the cartilage, but we're also trying to have the arm centered in the joint, although we're moving it in different ways. And before we go to the other side, just to finish what I'm saying, very often in our attempt to do a downward facing dog or whatever other position, if we don't have enough awareness and shoulder strength and stability in the shoulder, the arm will compensate by turning or bending or shoulder blades moving out of position, because it needs to find a way to follow the instructions that your brain gives it. Yeah. So here we want to first become aware of our range of motion, which we're going to test in a moment, and also how much control we have over our shoulders. And so let's externally rotate the right arm. You're pushing the other hand away. If you're collapsing into your joint, you're not helping your shoulder to center in the joint. Probably it's pushing into one corner or another of your joint, creating more tension into the neck structure, your trapezius, wherever it might want to create that tension to create stability, but it's not the most intelligent way to do that. Externally rotate, so diagonally across into the adduction. Arm lifts to the side of the ear, you push it behind you, you start to rotate your arm, and you continue that rotation until there's no more rotation, but the action stays, as if you want to continue to rotate inwardly. Find the edge, push a little more, rotate the arm, not your chest. Try not to lean toward your left side, and bring the arm diagonally in front of you into that adduction. And start from the adduction in external rotation. Try to maintain the external rotation for as long as possible. When you reach your maximum flexion, start to rotate in. Continue moving the arm in. If somebody is looking at you from the side and they can only see your body and not your arm, they should not be able to tell that you're moving anything. This is how still you are. Your pelvis is doing nothing, your spine is not moving, your head is not moving. Last one, find flexion, rotate inwardly, that is. Then you bring the arm behind you, lift the arm, find the edge, push a little more, and then rotate out. And bring the arm up, diagonally in front of you, and down. From here, pushing the floor forward, chin down, circle the head to your right shoulder, lift it up, rotate the head, chin to the left shoulder, and continue to move through in the same direction. Your hands are pressing, fingers are active, and already we're establishing that connection of hands and earth. Yeah? Your hands will be part of your foundation in downward dog. Finish with your chin down and reverse. And so we want to have a good connection. We want to have space between the hand bones. And if you're not pressing down, then you're compressing the hands. The muscles are not working sufficiently to support your joints. And you have much less strength and control in the joints upward the chain, elbows, shoulders, etc. And finish with your chin down. And let's come for a moment in all fours. And let's do some cat-cows, but let's try and do them segmentally. And so you're going to tuck the pelvis round, chin in, push the floor away, and then reverse. Sit bones up, let the spine unravel, lift the heart forward. And again, rounding your spine and coming into a spinal extension, an anterior tilt, what we call cow. And of course in cow, we're not collapsing. Everything wants to lift away from the floor. Now find neutral, tuck your toes. You keep the neck in line, so it's not neither lifting nor dropping. And of course here, neutral doesn't mean collapsing into the shoulders. This is the first part that we start to build that awareness that everything lifts away from the floor. And now hinge back as you move the pelvis back, and here try not to tuck and round, and then come forward. So we warm up a tiny bit our hips first. We're going back and forward. Going back, you try to find your flexion, keeping your spine straight. Pubic bone reaches back and forward. Great. Now, you did a very short warm-up. Now you're going to take your blocks and you're going to put them on the high setting. Yeah? And so we spoke about the shoulder blades. They're upwardly rotating. So when your arms here, they're not. But as they start coming higher than the glenohumeral angle, than your shoulder, then they upwardly rotate even more. Yeah? And so you're going to just place your hands on the blocks first, but you're going to push down. And as you push down, I want you to feel how the shoulders are pushing towards the floor to the back of the shoulders. And that might already give a very subtle rotation into your arms, but we don't want to go overboard. So your elbows are not looking forward, yeah? Your elbows are looking more or less towards each other. So from this pushing down of your arms, at the same time, feel that they're reaching forward. And you might feel the muscles here at the side of your shoulder and your shoulder blade, that they begin to engage and liven up. The heart is reaching forward. The chin bows down gently, and let's lift our hips just to be able to move back. I like to have my toes stuck in puppy pose. Yeah, it gives me better control and to also push against the floor. Now from here, the arms reach forward, they push down, and the hips are pulling back. So it's as if you're being pulled in opposite directions. Now as I come here, I feel that my knees are a little closed, so I wiggle back. And from here, pushing down, I start to lower down without letting my rib cage flare and open, without losing my axial spinal extension. So the spine is completely straight. The pubic pulls back, the tail is heavy, keeping that balance in the pelvis. And my hands are very actively pushing down and reaching forward. The back of the shoulders is pushing towards the floor so that I'm not collapsing into my shoulders. And slowly come back up. Now, something that I forgot to mention and we haven't tested, as I said we would, is the range of motion of your shoulders. And so, if you all raise your left arm up and see where you can actively send your arm without compensation from the elbow bending, from the arm rolling in. Yeah, you keep that external rotation. It doesn't need to be exaggerated. Just think thumb back. Yeah, and without using your spine, your rib cage, and your pelvis to find more range. Very often, this is the case. We lack strength, range of motion, passively or actively, and we end up compensating with other body parts. Yeah, so it's important to establish good range of motion, especially when it comes to poses like Urdhva Dhanurasana, upward facing bow, and many people do not have that range of motion required, and then they have to compensate using their lower back, or maybe they have very open hip flexors and a very bendy spine, but then the shoulders are not doing their fair share. So there's always one part of the body that takes up a little bit more work, and then it gets fatigued. So in complex poses like that, it's always a good idea to address separately each body part that contributes to the movement and work at it so that there's no single one part that does most of the work and then the others are not doing much. Similarly to downward dog. So you've tested one arm, you've noticed where your arm arrives. Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Can it go beyond your ear without using your spine? And then if you use your other arm, can you send it even further back? That would be your passive range. Let's check the other one. How far back can you send it using the strength of your shoulder without compensation from the spine? And then do you have more range taking it behind you passively? Probably you do, yeah? And so what that tells you that if your arms arrive there, or one arm is there and the other there, probably in your downward dog, you don't want to push too far down, because then you're going to compensate from the arms rolling in, maybe from your shoulder blades coming together and shrugging, or even from your spine going into a back bend, into extension, and the ribs flaring. Now, there's nothing wrong with using the downward facing dog as a way to open up more space into your thoracic spine or even the entire spine, but not when it comes to compensating with shoulder stability. If you can maintain your shoulder stability and strength and create a back bend, that's a different story, and the intent there is different. But first things first, control and stability, strength of your shoulders, range of motion, good range of motion, and the awareness to use that structure to elongate your spine. So in Ashtanga Yoga or in Vinyasa, we start with salutations, and the first posture we stay in is downward facing dog. And there you start to load your shoulders, and if you don't have established that brain body connection, priming your shoulders from the very beginning of your practice, then you might find that you continue to compensate in different ways when it comes to having arms overhead, or you don't have that spaciousness, or things seem a little tighter, especially when it comes to warrior or utkatasana. If you're always there in your downward dog, shrugging your shoulders, tensing the trapezius and your neck, then you end up doing your utkatasana and your warrior one like this, instead of already having the shoulders primed, strong and warmed up to keep that spiraling, to keep that reaching, to keep the heart, the front of the heart, but also the back open. And when you're in downward dog and you're letting your shoulder blades come towards one another, you're also pulling on the diaphragm and affecting how you're breathing, yeah? And then everything, either it stays tense or also passively retracting the shoulder blades and letting the chest collapse. which is not a back bend or an extension of the spine like I spoke before. It's just letting go. Yeah. And so in setting up for your downward dog, I like to have my index pointing forwards because this is how my arms and hands are in relation to each other. But you could also think of the crest of your wrist pointing forwards to the mat. If you have the tendency to have the middle finger pointing forward and the index slightly in, you might want to reconsider if your upper arm is rolling in and it's pulling on the shoulder. Yeah, that would be much more difficult to create that centering in the joint as we spoke, and it could also count as a compensation. So without locking your elbows, without blocking them, push the floor forward, let the arms stretch with a sense of externally rotating the arms like this external spiral without exaggerating. Toes are tucked, you push back, and as you do that, there's two opposing forces. The pubic bone is reaching back and the heart is reaching forward. So already your spine is straight. The arms are already reaching forward, your hands, we have your foundation established on the floor, and you slowly start to lift the bottom up. Now let's pause for a moment with our knees bent. And then I want you to feel the back of your shoulders. There's this sense that they're pushing towards the back. Yeah, so this outer structure, it's pushing towards your thighs. The arms are reaching forward, and see in relation to your range of motion that we found before, how far back you can send your body and where your torso arrives in relation to your arms. Your hands are still reaching forward. Now let your head relax. You can even turn it one side to the other to make sure it's relaxed. And keep lengthening the pubic bone back as you push your heels down to stretch your legs. But if your hamstrings are not happy, you don't have to stretch the legs all the way. Yeah, but you definitely don't want to just block your knees and round your spine. You want the spine to be straightened. Now noticing as the shoulder blades are upwardly rotating and your arms are growing longer forward, can you feel the sides of your waist lengthening? Can you feel that offloading of your spine as it lengthens? You might even feel the stretch in your belly as the pubic bone moves back and the heart forward. And slowly coming back down. And if you're not used to doing downward dog like this, you might feel that your shoulders are working quite a lot. Now, in time and with practice, cultivating that, you're able to find that balance between the effort to keep the stability and the strength and the effortlessness to stay there in downward dog and breathe without everything beginning to shake. But if you've been used on just hanging out there in your downward dog, it might feel like a lot of work. Yeah, but your shoulder blades and your shoulders are super important when it comes to stability, and your shoulder blades more than anything when it comes to core stability, but also in back bending. So if you don't have it established in one of the most fundamental positions in downward dog, it's very difficult to establish that connection and awareness into other positions that are more demanding and more complex. Now, we only focus on one aspect on downward dog. There could be loads. And so the focus of today's tutorial was the shoulders and the arms in downward dog. Yeah. Let me know if you have any questions, any observations, if you want any clarification, and if you'd like to look at other poses in such detail. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.